2024 is looking like it is going to be a big year, and that is not only because I'm going to be a first-time dad, but it's because it is looking like we are shaping up into a big crash. So we have to talk about that today, and that's why we're going to do some technical analysis on the weekly charts for the SPY, Qs, Apple, Tesla, Amazon, and Nvidia, and let's get into it. We are going to give you those updated weekly ranges as of Monday night. Okay, so Monday night, look forward to on Christmas. We still have to pay attention to the market next week because we will be on light volume. And something huge as of right now is we are outside of that monthly expected move. And 68% of the time, the options market gets this right. And we do end up back in this zone, which is kind of inviting us to see some kind of drop to at least get back within these yellow lines. Now, what we really want to talk about is 2024 and how this could shape out. And I just want to show you guys the overall reason that I'm seeing a big downturn in 2024. And that's because over here at the all-time high, we actually had a divergence on the MACD and RSI right up in here at the same time. And when they happen at the same time, it's a point to pay attention to the big picture, right? We saw it at the same time up here, and then we saw it again at our bottom down here. We actually saw it down here as well, and that's what we've been using to go higher. So what we want to pay attention to is whenever we see that signal pop up, because we see dramatic sell-offs when we do see that signal. So let's pay attention to this MACD right here. And as you can see, as of right now, we are actually forming that divergence. Okay, so we would have that set up right now, but it has not confirmed. So this can take quite some time to actually come to fruition. You do see that on the RSI as of right now. If we do see some bullishness into next week, this on the RSI could be invalidated. And maybe this is just some kind of pullback to head higher in the future. But I really think that 2024 is going to cross this MACD down and we're going to see some pain. Now, how that could play out on the SPY, we're going to do this on the SPY and then we're just going to look at the other chart like the Qs, and then some other stocks are doing some different things. But what we can pay attention to here is how would this actually play out? Okay, so the way that we're going to know if this is playing out is when that actually crosses. It takes quite a lot of time for that weekly to cross, meaning this could dip all the way down into, February, March before we actually see this crossing happen. So I'm not necessarily leaning towards that. At this point, I actually think there is some bullishness up in here, right? I mean, we've seen continued bullishness. We just see green bar after green bar. And I actually believe that we're going to dip down to lower levels and base out and curl back up. So I don't believe this is going to roll over right away, but really that's the signal you're waiting for. Once that does actually play out, if we pay attention to the last time it happened to the upside, look what happened when this little divergence up here mixed with this divergence on the MACD and RSI at the same time. We saw a big bear market, right? We saw some big swings, mainly to the downside. So we need to pay attention to it at this point and how this could play out. So how this could play out is either we're going to turn and keep turning and something's going to break and we're going to just start heading down, but really we pay attention for that crossing. Now, what I'm more leaning towards is a new all-time high. I actually do think we will get a new all-time high in 2024, and I believe we may see a few weeks of selling to get down into lower levels, right? Maybe an indecision week in here somewhere, and maybe we actually base out around this area and start to head higher and still keep this divergence intact. And then we actually make a new all-time high, and right when everyone's got sucked into the euphoria, everyone with the FOMO, everyone thinks the market can't go down, that's exactly when the crash is going to happen with those rate cuts. Now, I believe that first rate cut from the Fed will maybe come all the way in March, okay? So really pay attention to March. I believe we could see this turn down and turn back up, create that all-time high, get that euphoria, kind of violate this wedge that we've been in, actually, this wedge here that you see in front of you. I think we're going to violate that again on the SPY. The Qs, I think we're going to hold within it. But I believe we're going to make a new all-time high, and then we're actually going to see this start to break down with most likely a daily divergence. But we'll get into that on Monday. So join us back on Monday. Make sure to hit that subscribe button to join us back on Monday because we're going to be giving information for the week ahead and giving you those risk ranges. So we really want to pay attention to this breaking because you can see the measured move for this is going to be a test of that low. And if we do break below that low, we actually would be most likely going into negative territory. And you notice that this big downturn, right? This is actually a pretty good pullback here. And then we started to head higher. That did not get us into negative territory. But if we broke this, we actually would be getting into negative territory, right? This would be curling over. And if we head a little bit lower, you'd see this get into negative territory. And we actually might make a weekly negative trend starting in 2024. I'm just going to switch over to the Qs and show you this. We're going to talk about it because it's just a little bit cleaner, right? So I do believe we're going to make a new all-time high. We already have made a new all-time high in the Qs. Okay, so we need to pay attention to this. Was that signal up at the top actually on the Qs as well? Yes, you had these highs up in here, and you actually saw this divergence right here, and that's different from these divergences because we actually had that at the same time. Okay, so when you have it at the same time, it's a point to pay attention. You can see that this one right here to all the way over to here. So these two highs right in here, you actually saw we got a big test to the 20. So we can just come down and test the 20 and then start to react upwards. And then we start to see, you know, more bullishness throughout the year. So that is a possibility. I do believe we are going to make an even bigger all-time high in the Qs. And I think how that plays out with this divergence, I believe it will hold true. You can see it on the RSI at the same time. And I think we're going to break through this wedge eventually. Now the Qs still, I believe that we are going to see some kind of selling early on in 2024, right? I believe we're going to see some bars coming down, maybe it just comes down into this area here. Maybe that's all the pullback we get, and we hold up right at that 20-week moving average. So we need to pay attention to that. But also, we could see a further dip and then see a pop, right? We could see this dip all the way down into our trend here, into the bottom of our wedge, and then start to see a reaction up. And then at this level, we would be creating a big daily divergence, and that will be very, very clear. And we might even make, you know, another little dip down and push one more time. So that's really what I'm paying attention to. But overall, what we need to pay attention to in 2024 is if this rolls over, because that means that something bad is going to happen. If that rolls over, then we break this wedge. It's going down. Now, how low do the Qs go? I really think that we could, you know, come down into this trend line. So this trend line here is overall just a trend line between some prior dips, some prior crashes in the market. And you can see that we really like to hold on those trend lines, right? We held up right here, we held up right here. And now I think that could happen again. I actually believe we could see that start to come down to lower levels pretty quickly in 2024. Now, remember, these things don't just go straight down like my line here, right? We dip down, we pop, we go down, we pop up, we come down. So it's going to be a time for volatility to come back into this market. But I do believe in the near future, we do have time to build on this, right? I believe we could come down into this level of 372.50, hit our bottom side of the wedge, and then actually make another reaction up, creating a bigger all-time high that really sucks people in right before we start to crash. Genuinely, I just want to say, if you were seeing this on an hourly chart, what would you be thinking? So the fact that this is a weekly chart, we have to say it holds true on the hourlies as well. You would be saying, hey, this actually probabilities are pointing to if we do get tight within this wedge, we're looking for a reaction, and this actually has the probability of dropping down. So we really want to pay attention to these things, and all you have to do is pay attention to this weekly. If this weekly does roll over and get into negative territory, we're most likely going to see this break and see some kind of downfall. Now, if this does curl over and then curl back up into positive territory, we've talked about that a lot. If it curls back up in positive territory, you are going to test the previous high and possibly make a new one. So it's not to say, you know, we have to go down right away when this signal happens. We have two options here. If it does curl down and curl back up, that would still be a bullish thing, right? We would be curling down and curling back up on a weekly chart, and that would maybe extend us into that all-time high, right? That bigger all-time high on the Qs. And then you would get that triple divergence on the weekly, which is a very, very strong signal, especially as you are creating a wedge, especially when you see all the euphoria right before we get rate cuts. And every time in history when those rate cuts come in, everyone gets bullish before they happen. And I believe it's going to be a buy the rumor, right? I believe we might dip down, and then we'll see some kind of buy the rumor, which is those rate cuts. And when they actually happen, I think we're going to see a big drop. Now, I just showed you the SPY and the Qs that are actually trickling upward as of the past few weeks, right? As of last week especially, you're seeing that trickle up, and the Apple here is not confirming that. Okay, Apple is actually dipping down to lower levels, which is a very popular stock. So if you were heading higher and this was healthy, you'd really want Apple to be participating in that move. So we can see the last time that we did have a divergence down here on the MACD and the RSI at the same exact time would have been actually at our low. So we knew to buy in this area because we could see, hey, the momentum is dying out. You have the potential for a bounce. And if that bounce is able to get into positive territory, you notice when we're hesitating, we're right at that center line, right? We're right at that center line where we're hesitating. And as we go into positive territory, we see that big extension. Okay, and then we get some consolidation in the form of a wedge, and we actually form a little trend here. We actually form another bigger wedge. Okay, so I am creating a wedge out of this as of right now, and I do believe Apple does have a little bit of room to go higher, but right now we could see that actually dip down and then come back up into this area where we could see that selling start. So we really want to pay attention to this, as you can look at the MACD and see that there is that weekly divergence on the MACD and the RSI at the same time. So if this confirms, it is going to be a very, very bearish signal for 2024. Even though everyone thinks there's going to be a soft landing, it's going to be a rough one. And the reason I believe we're going to see some selling early on is because a lot of these divergences need to hold up as of right now. They need to confirm, right? So in order for these to be intact, we'd need to see a downturn pretty quick. So we could see this as some kind of fake out to the upside. We came into the weekly expected move last week, and then we could see that drop down with these divergences on the RSI and the MACD at the same time. And if that is able to confirm, which I'm not leaning towards, I really think we're going to see some kind of pullback, maybe to the 20, bounce off the 200 on the weekly scale. And then we'll actually see one more reaction up, pumping up Amazon one more time. And then everyone gets euphoric. Everyone says this market's, not going to go down. Everyone says, hey, the Fed did a good job. There's going to be a soft landing. And then we see that those rate cuts come in, and that's when the downturn starts. The reason I'm saying if that does hold up and that crosses, well, let's look at the last time Amazon had that divergence. We saw that these two lows come in here, and we actually saw that the MACD was creating a higher low. So that just tells us there's divergence there. You have it on the MACD and the RSI down here at the same time, and those are usually the best signals to give you some direction for the next 6 months to even a year. So we can really pay attention to this. You see these Bollinger Bands are starting to spread out, which means we can get big swings in this market. And maybe Amazon does pull back, go a little bit higher, and then drop. And we could see another extended move down in Amazon over 2024. Tesla, I think you have a good chance of coming up into this area and testing this high and even making a new one all up in here. So we want to pay attention to Tesla because it's a little bit different than the other stocks, but overall we just want to pay attention to it's very close to that center line. So a lot of these divergences are pretty close to that center line, and we have to pay attention to it. And I believe how Tesla is actually going to play this out is we're going to see some kind of dip down into this area right here, right around that 229 level, and then maybe we actually go a little bit lower to hit this trend, right? If we can confirm this as an actual trend with a third touch, that would be a good sign. And then maybe we actually get some kind of breakout, which might just be some kind of fake out over a monthly scale. So I will pay attention to this and give you guys more updates about Tesla, because I believe that Tesla actually has a lot of room to the downside. So we want to pay attention to it. But overall, you can see how close we are to making a negative trend. And the last time that we started a negative trend, right, we got into negative territory. Look at that downturn. So we can see this big downturn, and right as we get into negative territory, we actually drop pretty significantly. And then this one here, we tried to get into positive territory. Right when it curls over, we start to see these gaps down, right? We start to see these gaps down, and we go from a price point of, what is that, 315 all the way down to 100. So I do believe that Tesla will be a great investment in the future, but we have to be patient because I think it's going to get into negative territory, and you're going to see another drop in Tesla just like this one. Tesla wanted to get bullish now, like if it wanted to get bullish as of right now, which we could see that market actually just keep trailing upward all the way up until we see some kind of big drop. So if Tesla does want to keep trailing up, which I'm not necessarily leaning towards, I really think we're going to see this kind of consolidate down and then start to see a break upward. If it does break up from here, you are in that positive territory, so you could see that reaction. But overall, what we're paying attention to is this high right here. I really think you have a great chance for Tesla to test this 300 level over the first quarter of 2024, and that's something to pay attention to, because if it actually does curl up and then curl back down, we will have another divergence on Tesla, and it is right next to that negative territory, which is just inviting for this move to be a fake out, and actually the real move is a big drop to the downside with those rates being cut. Now, Nvidia, we can see that we don't necessarily have divergence, and I really think this MACD is actually going to curl up, but I think we're going to keep like consolidating like this for quite some time, and maybe we actually use this zone in here, which is actually some gaps on the daily, to springboard higher, giving us that higher low. And I do actually believe that Nvidia has the chance to hit 600 before we actually see it fall. And I do believe in Nvidia itself will drop like a rock because it's seen so much bullishness. A lot of people are still holding this stock. So if something bad happens in the overall market and you see that divergence form on the weekly scale, then we can see a very, negative trend on Nvidia. And so what I really want to pay attention to here on the weekly scale, right, is if we do get that reaction up, once we do react from there, are we able to get into negative territory first off, and then are we able to cut below these levels? So if you start to cut below these levels, I believe you have a good chance of going into that negative territory in the near future, meaning in the next few months. Okay, so we're on a weekly scale, so the near future is a few months out. And I do believe this does have more room to the upside if it does get some consolidation into the end of the year and into January, and then maybe we see that pop higher, giving us that obvious divergence. So really, I'm just pointing out on every chart how there are divergences that seem to be forming. They haven't confirmed yet, and that's very important to understand. But if these do confirm, it means very, very bad things for 2024. Last thing I wanted to talk about was you also have those divergences on all those charts that I just showed you. Every stock is showing you divergence forming, not confirmed on the MACDs and stuff like that for these stocks. So everything that we've looked at looks like it has some kind of divergence forming, and then we do see that proven on the VIX at the same time. Okay, so the VIX is actually telling you, hey, there is potential for some extreme volatility on a weekly scale to come back into this market, and I do believe we're going to see this really hit some high levels. So I think once we're able to cross, and I'm just going to show you that divergence down here real quick. You see that divergence on the MACD, you see this divergence down here on the RSI at the same time, going in the same direction, right? So we want to pay attention to it because we're making that low, but we're actually making a higher low on the MACD and RSI as of right now, which just tells you to be cautious at this point because something very bad can happen over the next 6 months, and so you need to position yourself correctly. The other thing I wanted to point out was the last time we saw this signal and what happened. So we actually saw this flatness in price, and we actually see that we're making a higher low on the MACD, getting very, very close to that positive territory, meaning that volatility is going to go up into a positive trend, and that's exactly what happened. And what did we do? We actually reached a level of 36. We breached that and reached a level of about 39, and then we stayed up there. We saw spikes in this volatility continue, and I think that is going to happen again if this plays out, because look how close we are to that center line. You are just inviting volatility back into this market and to get into a positive trend over quite some time. So 2024 looks like it is going to be a tough year. The main takeaway for this video is pretty obvious. I'm showing you a bunch of weekly divergences that are right in front of you, telling you there is some big possible volatility to come in, some big selling to come in 2024. Now we do want to pay attention for those MACDs to cross over and confirm those divergences. But you'll notice they're right next to that negative territory, and it looks like once that does cross, we're going to head down. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great Christmas. I hope you enjoy all of it. Enjoy spending time with your family. Have a great 3-day weekend, and then we're going to get back into these markets next week on some low volume. So be careful out there, manage your risk, and I hope you have a good night. Peace.